Before you get started with any project, it's important to identify the prerequisites and components that are required for the implementation. You don't want to get started and then find that you missed something important and find out that the installation just isn't going to work. With that in mind, let's talk about the vSphere prerequisites. First off, the HCL is your friend. What do I mean by that? Well, the hardware compatibility list, as it's generally been called with Windows Server for years, but which VMware calls the compatibility guide, is going to be your most helpful source to tell you exactly which hardware is needed, what type of hardware, how much hardware, and any other requirements that you might need to meet to ensure that your installation is going to be a success. For example, we are here at vmware.com/resources/compatibility, and this is the VMware compatibility guide. Now, in this guide, you can search for just about anything you want related to compatibility with VMware products. I'm talking about VMware vSAN, NSX, VMware Cloud Foundation, and much more. In our case, we're searching for systems or servers that are compatible with ESXi, specifically version 7.0. Now, we could do quite a bit of filtering down here if we'd like to, but in my experience, the keyword option looks good here. And we know that the model of server we're using is a Supermicro Sys E208D. So if I put that in and click Update and View Results, this is what we get. It finds the server, the model, the CPU series, and it tells us the versions of vSphere that this server is compatible with. Now, I'll tell you that vSphere 7 is not yet on the list, so it wouldn't be officially supported. However, vSphere 7 was just recently released, and with it having a long history of supporting VMware vSphere across multiple versions of vSphere 6.7, I'm confident that vSphere 7 will also be certified for this model of server. So while it's not officially supported, we are moving forward with the implementation. If you click on the model number here of the server, you can get some additional details. You can see that the server does have Intel Xeon D1500 CPUs and that it is compatible with VMware fault tolerance. So that's the VMware compatibility guide. Again, there's a lot of searching you can do in here to ensure that your hardware that you use is going to be compatible with ESXi and all other related VMware products. Now, besides ensuring compatibility, you also need to meet the minimum requirements. And the first one is you need to have at least 2 CPU cores. So you can just have a single CPU socket in your host, that's fine, but that socket needs to have at least 2 CPU cores. And I'll just tell you today, that should not be a problem. Pretty much every CPU out there has at least 2 cores. You also need to make sure that your CPUs that you're using are supported CPUs. And just because they were compatible with vSphere 6.7 doesn't mean they're going to be compatible with vSphere 7. VMware has recently made some changes when it comes to which CPUs are supported with vSphere 7. And I'll tell you, this is actually one of the reasons that I purchased a new lab at the Wired Brain Coffee Company. The host that you install ESXi on needs to have at least 4 gigabytes of memory, with 8 gigabytes being recommended. You should have Intel VT or AMD V enabled in the BIOS of that host. You also need to make sure that your CPUs have Intel VT or AMD V enabled in the BIOS. These are features that you enable on your CPU called virtualization extensions. And without enabling these, you won't be able to run 64-bit virtual machines on your ESXi hosts. You also need to have, of course, an Ethernet adapter. A 1 gigabit Ethernet adapter is fine. A 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter is recommended. And finally, of course, you'll need space to install the operating system and additional space for any new virtual machines that you create. So those are the minimum requirements. Don't forget that the hardware compatibility guide is your friend to ensure that your hardware is going to be compatible.